All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. As our host, Brandon, joined my co-host Dan, because it's a midday special. We've got Adam Newson giving us some updates, and you're really hot and bothered to get this one up, Dan. I mean, I'm excited to hear what you have planned for Adam. Hopefully, you've given him a heads up and you don't blindside him like Boehly did to the rest of us today.
Well, I mean, we are trying to make sure that we prepare guests, but when Graham Potter does a thrilling first press conference, when Jorginho drops and sprinkles in a couple of quotes there that people can latch onto, and then Todd Boehly goes to a financial conference and starts dropping tons of answers on questions that are football related and very specifically about Chelsea. Surprise, he's the new owner. Guess we shouldn't be too shocked. Adam, I feel like we were talking about recording 2 to 3 hours ago, and then now we're here, and we have 5 different topics to cover now too.
Yeah, I mean, we probably should have expected this, right? Given the way Chelsea have been this year, that it's never a dull day.
Yeah. What do we say? It's like dog years following Chelsea. Multiples of 7. Every one season feels like it's been an eternity. We've had the sanctions in the last 12 months. We've won the Club World Cup in the last 12 months, yet they seem like eternities away. So anyways, for those of you unfamiliar, just to make sure our man, Adam Newson, gets a good plug, Football.London is where you can find all of his great work. Absolute top Chelsea journalists covering the club that we got to hang out with during the summer tour, which was great to.
That was like 2 years ago.
It feels like it.
Yeah, it feels like that, yeah.
For different reasons. But anyways, we just want to get some updates on what's going on with Chelsea. A lot of it will probably be around Graham Potter and some different things. So without really delay, we kind of want to get a state of the state here. Obviously, Graham Potter recently announced, immediately given the weekend off, which was quite delightful. We have the Champions League match against RB Salzburg tomorrow, which would be on Wednesday, probably the day you're listening to this. So kick it off though. Potter era. We're getting some Chelsea TV interviews. We're getting his press conferences, initial thoughts, feelings, vibes that you're getting from Graham Potter. To me, he seems like a bit of a quiet, reserved, measured man. Is that how he's coming across the media, or is he electric like Antonio Conte and we just don't see it?
No, I think what you see in the media is very much what you get with Graham Potter. Speaking to people around the club, they've sort of said, there's no airs or graces about him at all. He's very humble, modest, just a sort of normal guy, really, which I guess isn't a huge surprise given his playing career wasn't necessarily, an illustrious playing career. And he has, done the hard route to get to this point as a coach. He's done the hard yards in Sweden, has built his reputation at Swansea and Brighton, and is now getting this massive chance to coach Chelsea. So I don't think it's a huge surprise he's coming in without an ego. Hopefully that will be a very good thing for Chelsea and the squad, because I think from everything I've read and bits and pieces I've heard about Potter is he seems quite a relatable guy, and a guy who doesn't ever be harsh with players, tries to understand them as people before professionals, basically, because he wants to make sure he knows what motivates a lot of people, and obviously different people are motivated by different things. So I think in these opening, where are we now, 4 days, he's getting to know everybody. He's not trying to be anything he isn't. He's not trying to be Thomas Tuchel and drop excellent one-liners in press conferences. It's not going to be his style. He's going to do things his way. And I think that will serve him well in time, because today in the press conference, like I say, he wasn't electric like someone like Tuchel. You are kind of hanging on their every word. But I thought there was also a sort of a quiet authority to him, I felt.
Adam, as you look at it now, so we're 6 days into having Graham Potter appointed, into the dismissal of Tuchel. There's been a lot of shaping of the narratives, I think, from whether that's Tuchel's camp, whether that's the club, whether that's just general opinion out in the world. I guess looking at it now with a little bit more hindsight, what's becoming clear in the process? So I think that people made a lot of assumptions around how premeditated this may have been. We've heard from Todd Boehly now today at the SALT conference, where he was mentioning, how the decision came about, which I think is part of the conversation that had been missing up to this point. So I guess from your perspective, as you go back to re-report it in your mind, what do we know now about how this all came to fruition, both the sacking of Tuchel and the appointment of Potter?
Well, in terms of Tuchel, I mean, the sort of seeds for this were sown on the preseason tour, and you guys were out there on a lot of that. And it was clear that Tuchel wasn't overly happy with certain things. And at that point, it was easy to put it down to, you know, the travel, the time zones, the heat, the fact that that he didn't like the pitch in UCLA. I mean, there were a few grumbles that you heard, but it sort of became apparent whilst we were, you know, whilst I was out in America and others were, that Tuchel wasn't necessarily enamored with everything. And the hope was that once you get him back to Cobham and get the squad back to Cobham, things would settle down and it would all get back to normal. But I think as the longer that Todd Boehly and Boehly and Tuchel worked together, the more it became clear that maybe they weren't suited for each other. And you know what? I don't think that's a huge issue. I mean, these guys spent a lot of money on the club. They obviously view it as a business as well as a football club, and they want to have a guy leading that who they feel is aligned with their beliefs and how they want to work. There was never any doubt, I don't think, on the part of Boehly and Boehly about Tuchel's ability as a coach. I think they knew he was an absolute brilliant coach, a guy who could deliver success in a certain environment, but it wasn't the environment that they wanted to sort of develop at Chelsea. They wanted to develop a very collaborative, a very open environment at Chelsea where everybody speaks to each other. There's no walls between departments. There's no sort of hushed conversations between a very closed group of people. They want everybody to be able to communicate. And maybe that wasn't what Thomas or sort of how Thomas wanted to work. He had his coaching staff he was very close with, and obviously he had Marina Granovskaya and Petr Cech before then, who he was, you know, especially with Cech. I think you can't overlook how big Cech's departure was for Tuchel because of how important he was for him. And, you know, ultimately it came to the point where the new owners decided that Tuchel wasn't going to be the fit that they wanted, and they wanted their own man. And, you know, they'd done some recon on Graham Potter by the sounds of it in the summer. You know, I think it's been highlighted that when Chelsea held talks with Cucurella and Brighton, that Boehly already knew a lot about Graham Potter. And that maybe isn't necessarily to say he was already thinking about doing that then. He was just, you know, maybe doing some due diligence on potential options for the future. And then obviously it happened within the space of sort of a little more than 24 hours last week that Tuchel went and Potter came in, and Chelsea have another new head coach.
You know, following up on that, you know, I think we've seen some of the quotes from Boehly now, or for those who haven't, he referenced some of the things about how the vision of finding a manager who really wanted to collaborate less to coach who wanted to collaborate. There's a lot of walls to break down at Chelsea, which is what you referenced. But then he followed that up on the academy and first team bridge about how they didn't share information about where the top players were coming from. So our goal is to really bring the team together with the academy and the first team, and the lack of data sharing across a academy and first team seems pretty wild to me, Adam, when you've had some of the most consistent performers in your first team squad be individuals that came from that setup. And so were you surprised to hear that, or does that ring true with maybe what we've seen within how the minutes have been distributed potentially to, you know, senior internationals versus trying to kind of embed a new academy player this season?
It didn't surprise me. And I think and without wanting to get into the culture war of Frank Lampard and everything, but I think you've looked back to Lampard's time, and he obviously had Jody Morris and Joe Edwards on his first team staff. So he had that link to the academy within his coaching team. Now those guys have since moved on, haven't been sort of really replaced in the first team staff. So the fact that there wasn't that link anymore didn't surprise me, if I'm being honest. I think the fact that the data teams don't share information is strange. And it is something that has to change across the board. And from what I can gather, you know, this, like it or not, Roman Abramovich set up Chelsea in a certain way where he had very trusted people in certain positions. And it wasn't, you know, just email. You can just email this person, you can find out this information. It was a bit more individual, and people had, you know, their certain groups, and there wasn't a huge crossover between departments. And, you know, that has led to problems. We've seen some news reports, and it's time, I think, that Chelsea probably take themselves forward as a club, and Todd Boehly and the new ownership group really want to do that. And you'd like to think that, in time, as more data is shared, as more knowledge is gained across all departments, that it benefits not only the first team, but all levels of the club.
Well, I tell you what, I think that's also to your question, Dan, that's a little bit more probably ownership, leadership based versus manager to manager, because, they have to work within these structures. But yeah, to your point, it's crazy, especially with the success of the academy and developing players. Matt Law he's a huge Emanalo fan, right? And he always talks about like the Emanalo days where it seemed like everybody was on the same page, and that had gone away. So we'll have to really see how this all shakes out. Again, posturing at the highest level of Boehly, because Tuchel tweeted for the first time since like 2020. And then before that, it was like his PSG announcement in 2019. Like, the dude doesn't tweet. So for him to like have to, like when you haven't used an app in a long time and like your phone shelves it in the cloud because you don't use it, he had to like re-download Twitter to send those tweets.
He had to reset his password. He had to redo his two-factor. He never set up two-factor authentication. That thing wasn't turned on at all. Yeah.
They're like, we feel like you're in a different country than last time you tweeted, sir. Is this you?
Anyway, suspicious activity on this account.
Yeah, like, have you been in Germany, France, and now England? Are you okay? Anyways, Adam, multi-club, right? Pinball style, multi-ball and activated. He wants feeder clubs in different countries. He wants total domination. He wants an all-star game. Todd Boehly is here to just ruin everyone's day. There's not Chelsea FC. We're going to have to see how it goes. But I think the one thing you got was his ambition. He is thinking at such a macro level when it comes to Chelsea. Now, is he going to do everything? Only time will tell. And I'm sure there's going to be barriers and roadblocks to certain things. But my word, he seems to be thinking genuinely about like world domination. And especially if we hone in on that multi-club model. Obviously, you talked about the Red Bull model, RB Leipzig, RB Salzburg. The City Football Group is obviously well known. They have teams, I believe, in Belgium and Australia. I think he sees some advantages to it. And I think specifically he talked about developing players. Loans are a little bit risky because you're outsourcing development to non-Chelsea interested people. What did you make of all of that?
Very interesting, although perhaps not entirely surprising. It makes sense from a club of Chelsea's size and Chelsea's ambition to find better ways to develop younger players. And you kind of like it or not, the City Football Group model, and probably more what Red Bull have done is a better one in terms of the link between Salzburg and Leipzig, because these are two sides that compete regularly in the Champions League, yet still are able to sort of bring players from one club to another. I do agree with Todd Boehly in the sense of you look at loan players, and we've seen very talented loan players leave Chelsea. And then after half a season, you're left sitting there going, oh my God, this guy's not playing. Why is he not playing? It's really bad for his development. So, of course, to have that sort of internal solution almost of being able to send them to another club that's owned by you is attractive. We'll see how easy this empire is to build. Obviously, football clubs can be very expensive, especially those that compete in Europe and potentially at the level that Boehly would maybe like to have another club at. But as long as you, and this is something we were discussing before we started recording, as long as you can keep each club's culture and each club's individual sort of personality almost within your group, I don't think it's the worst idea in the world on the part of Chelsea, and I do think it can help them and ensure that even the academy players and those brought in, people like Chukwuemeka and Casadei, these guys maybe can take their first steps in senior football at a club that is owned by the Chelsea ownership, and with the view that one day these guys, they're being put on the path basically to Chelsea first team.
I mean, I love hearing about development, Dan. Anytime you can hear about protecting our assets, developing players. He got flamed a little bit for the La Masia and saying that we developed KDB and Salah, but his heart's in the right place. I think if you're a Chelsea fan, I wouldn't get too caught up, especially like the 4-4-3. I mean, that's just like cheap shit to throw at him. I think we all kind of understand that he's not meant to be a soccer expert. He's meant to be an owner operator of elite sports teams. So like, at least I can forgive the guy. I don't know. I'm sure there's people out there like excited to throw darts at him over it.
Well, when you take out an individual soundbite and amplify it out of the full context, it can definitely distort the original intent of the message. And so I could imagine where someone said something and then corrected themselves, but taken in context or being weaponized by either side as they look to win a little bit of the divorce. I think that, we all as Chelsea supporters are the kids, and we have former parent Thomas Tuchel and current custodial parent of Todd Boehly and Chelsea, both trying to convince us that they have our best interests at heart, or that they weren't the problem in the ending. And so I think Todd, in the way he talked about this in terms of it not just not being the right fit for both sides, makes a lot of sense, and I think helps us move into a new era together. I wouldn't look too far beyond it. And I think the other encouraging thing that Todd shared in that was just talking about how he and his organization, his team, they called it human capital, but knowing people, knowing that this is not up to them to do solely, and needing to empower people, particularly after a summer where Todd and Boehly and others had to be way more hands-on, and looking to get people in the right position with the right credentials so that they can focus on the things that they want to focus on to take the club forward, and not have to be a sporting director and a lead scout and an advisor to the manager is going to just do wonders for pushing the club forward. We're in such an early day period of it still that I think that gets lost, that we expect them all to be perfect. And this is a growing opportunity for everyone.
I just think on Boehly's comments as well, there are going to be comments made today, or the comments made today by Todd Boehly. There are going to be people who don't like them and see this as challenge to tradition and blah blah blah, English or heritage, etc. But I don't think there's anything wrong with having these conversations. And Todd Boehly is floating ideas, and he's not saying that everything he's saying is the right thing to do or the best way forward. He's just suggesting ideas, discussion points that they can have in the future. And I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with doing that. He's certainly not trying to change English football or suggest the Premier League should completely revolutionise what it does. It's just a starting point to have a discussion. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all.
Well, I think you're going to get people who latch on to the idea of the All-Star game, which is a very popular
All-Star game.
It's a very popular concept in U.S. sport, and the fact that he framed it as like a way to potentially do funding for the entirety of the football pyramid.
Exactly. Context is key.
The context is key, not, hey, he's proposing an All-Star game. Well, of course, if he just said it in context, an All-Star game doesn't make sense.
And scarves.
A Premier League hat, Rob Lowe style with the NFL shield on it.
To be fair, I'd love to see the dynamics of an all-star game in the Premier League I don't know how you do it without pissing off clubs, basically. Because if you're saying, can we just pinch a couple of your best players to play this game? I imagine, and most of them be like, no.
Yeah, welcome to America, my man. That's exactly what happens every year.
But if they could say, hey, this would allow us to, you all use the championship and lower leagues to grow your players. You want to have more places to put them potentially in England versus having to send them overseas to a different organization. This will pump more money into those clubs and allow the game to kind of continue to grow within the UK. I think there's a good initial, at least, framing pitch that you could put together. I don't know how well it will be received because, again, it came from someone with our accent versus your accent, Adam. Yeah. And that definitely always is a little bit of the initial barrier, but hopefully more conversation can occur between all parties about ideas like this. It might ultimately help the game and improve longevity and allow for clubs who have continued to be financially impacted post-COVID to get the operating funds that they need. Like that to me sounds like a very positive idea, but again, it's still early days.
Well, I would like to leave you with this thought before we hit the ad break, that he did not rule out the Super League. Yeah, we all heard it. And then again, context is key. They kept pushing him on it. It was so funny to hear, but he reversed it, I thought, quite well and said the Champions League has so much to offer. Why would you change it? But again, the shots were taken. Todd was in the batter's box, just fighting for his life, foul ball after foul ball, trying to stay alive till he could hit his home run, which I think he did at the end. But anyways, that was much too cheeky for my part. We're going to take our ad break. When we're back, we're going to talk more on Graham Potter and the next chapter in Chelsea's managerial book. So thank you to the sponsors for financially supporting the show, and we'll be right back. All right, Dan, cue the Harry Potter memes. Am I right?
I think there's going to be a fair number of them throughout Graham Potter's tenure, at least initially as we get to know him. I'm sure he'll come up with his own identity as a manager, but this is, Adam, as I think all of us uncovered today, not just the first game that Potter will be managing in the Champions League. He does have experience in Europa League insofar, but also the first one he's attending as well, which is quite a dual night for him to get the best seat in the house to witness his first Champions League match and to coach it.
Yeah, it's going to be strange that I have more Champions League experience than the Chelsea head coach tomorrow. Look, I don't think it's a huge issue, to be completely honest. As you say, he's got Europa League experience. He's coached in the Premier League. He knows his way around things. You know, he knows how to set up a team against very, very good sides. He's beaten very, very good Premier League sides. Of course, you know, the environment of the Champions League, I guess, the atmosphere might be a touch different. I mean, it will be a touch different tomorrow night just because of circumstances around the game, but I don't think it's a massive problem personally. I do think that the game is very important from a Chelsea perspective because having dropped points against Dinamo Zagreb, I don't think Chelsea can afford not to win this one because it doesn't leave them with any wiggle room going into the Milan games. You want to be in a position where you can maybe take a draw from one of those and throw some darts at a board at this point and see. But as I say, I think the fact that he doesn't, he hasn't been to a Champions League game or coached in one is being a little oversold in my opinion.
Well, I think the maybe bigger concern is the players that he won't have available for this matchup in no N'Golo Kante and no Edouard Mendy for him, which I think creates some challenges for him as he's looking to maybe draw up his 11. Is there any indication based upon what you're looking at, both in his history at Brighton or just maybe who is available and healthy, as what you think the starting 11 might look like?
I'm not putting in a commit to personnel because that's a wild guess. I would be very surprised if he massively deviated away from the sort of 3-5-2 or 3-4-3 system. It's what he sort of favoured at Brighton. And I think given the circumstances, yes, he's had a few days to work with the players, but I'm not sure he would throw out everything that Thomas Tuchel had done. So I do think we'll probably see the 3-5-2 or 3-4-3. I guess the hope is that within that you'll see certain attacking players given maybe a bit more license to express themselves. I think that was one of the sort of standout quotes he did in his discussion with the Chelsea website, giving players license to make mistakes, to take risks. And that is something we probably haven't seen for a while in the Chelsea attack. There was very much a feeling of Chelsea being a bit safe, maybe even a little bit stale under Tuchel in the final third. So I think it will hopefully help those guys. And, if you want me to have a stab at the team, I mean, Thiago Silva will come back in, I'm sure, having not played last week. I have a feeling Aubameyang will probably start just as a show of faith that, you're not just a Tuchel guy, we believe in you. And I think Sterling starts as well. And I guess the big interesting thing is does he throw Cucurella straight back in, having sort of come out of the team for Chilwell last week? Because obviously they know each other very well from their time at Brighton.
I think that's about as far as you want to get, probably in naming names at this point. I mean, you could probably throw Kepa and feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, that's true.
The good news, I think, with those injuries is that it's not like he was preparing with them and then lost them right before the match. I mean, I'm sure he came in, and by the time he got there, he realized Mendy had a knock, and we already knew Conte was out. So that definitely, I think, helps with the situation. And then knowing that one of the two injured players is a goalkeeper, where it's literally straight in, straight out. There's no, Ruben at right wing back going into center mid and kind of having to shift formations or things like that. So I think that helps, and minus having the world-class player there. I think you kind of touched on Cucurella. Obviously, they have experience together. Obviously, Cucurella owes him a lot for the growth in his career, going from, what was a Getafe in Spain to Brighton and now to Chelsea in very quick succession. I would like to think that all players are on the chopping block with Potter, right? Everyone needs this clean slate, earn their role in there. Do you feel like, based on, I guess, what you've been learning as you talk to people, are there people you think that he's going to lean on more? Is this going to be the third manager in a row to like Mason Mount? Could you imagine?
I think he might like Mason Mount, guys. Not to shock everybody, but
Frank's son is still around.
Yeah, I think the guy who has sort of earned the trust of two Chelsea head coaches and the England head coach might just have a role to play under the next Chelsea head coach. I think, as you say, it is a clean slate for everybody. And from speaking to people around Cobham, I mean, there has been a sort of a renewed vigor around the place. It did get a little bit dreary towards the end of the Tuchel era. I mean, from what I can understand, and from what's been reported as well, his communication with players had dropped off a lot. There wasn't necessarily too much explanation as to why certain players were playing, why others weren't, what a certain player who wasn't playing could do to get back into the team. So I think when a new manager comes in this situation, everybody is eager to impress and make their mark. I think it's logical, especially for this first game, that somebody like Cucurella gets leaned on a little bit more, maybe the experience of Silva, Koulibaly, Jorginho in midfield, Aubameyang. I mean, it's kind of logical you turn to these more experienced heads on nights like this. Does he bring Cesar Azpilicueta back into the starting 11? I mean, perhaps. I mean, Azpi seems to have this ability after a new head coach to come in to suddenly find himself back in the team and perform well for a period. So I wouldn't be hugely surprised if it was a sort of back three of Azpi, Silva and Koulibaly, and with Reece at right wing back. And then he has, I think it's 2.5 weeks basically. Of course, part of that's the international break, but he'll have 2.5 weeks, Graham Potter, to probably sit down and really evaluate the squad. Of course, most of the players won't be around, but he'll have a good chance to watch footage, to go back over previous games, to speak to other players who are at the club still, to speak to coaches who have stayed on, to get a really good idea of what this squad is and who are the leaders in this squad and who he will be able to lean on. Because yes, he's had conversation with senior players and players in the squad, but there's only so much you can glean from those, because every player has their own sort of agenda they want to push or desire to get. So I think this first match will be probably experience in a similar way to, I think, Tuchel's first match was lent on experience as well. And then he will have a good couple of weeks to really get his feet under the table and work out where he wants to take this Chelsea side and the squad going forward.
Is there any sense on any of the coaching staff that has stayed around that's more of a Chelsea figure versus a Tuchel figure who may make their way into the grouping that Potter brought with him? So is there anyone kind of in the periphery or maybe kind of early promotion from the academy side who might be that human bridge? We've talked about the data bridge, but is there thoughts around like a human bridge that would exist too?
I mean, I've not heard that as yet. And obviously most academy decisions are sort of involving Neil Bath in terms of where his staff go. Anthony Barry is still around. Obviously a big part of, brought in by Frank Lampard, a big part of Tuchel's coaching staff. He's still working with the first team under Graham Potter so far. So he at least can bring in that, as I was saying, that sort of experience of the squad and the players. He knows them well. But in terms of a bridge between the academy and first team, which, as you say, is quite a logical role that you feel should be had. I've not had anything on that front, but But look, Graham Potter's brought in quite a lot of staff, so there may be in time that somebody sort of takes up that role a little bit as the weeks and months progress.
Odds that he changes the captaincy?
I mean, I don't think he will, because Cesar Azpilicueta is everything you'd want from a club captain. Yes, he may not be the player he was 5 years ago, but as a leader, as a professional guy who will do everything you ask of him, who will set an example, as a guy who, and let's face it, there is a certain ceremonial element to being club captain. You have to go to functions and represent the club. You're not going to find someone better than Cesar Azpilicueta to do that. So I would be surprised if he changed the captaincy.
Fair enough. That was definitely kind of a Hail Mary on that one. Again, no time soon, I think, will that happen. And Aspie has limited minutes at times. So it's like, usually he's captain, but you have someone else wearing the armband on the field too. So I hear you. All right. The next one up is Conte contract questions. There's a rumor about a potential contract extension for Conte, who is nearing free agency status. What's your understanding about what the club and the player want and where there's potentially an agreement? My understanding is that Marina's team offered 3+1. Boehly's offering 2+1. And Gola said 3+1 sounded better. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, that seems to be the story of it. And from Kante's perspective, you can completely understand why. I actually wrote a piece on this for Football.London today, where you look at Chelsea's win percentage in the Premier League under Thomas Tuchel. When Kante was around, it was far higher than when he wasn't. So yes, he's had his injuries, and of course that has to come into your thinking. But I think Kante can point to the fact of, look, when I am fit, I do make this team an awful lot better. So you may want to keep me around for a little bit longer. But from Chelsea's perspective, if you're only getting 25 games of N'Golo Kante at his top level, is he worth that financial investment? And let's keep in mind, he is one of the best paid players in the squad, deservedly so. But for the next 3 years, do you want him to stay as one of the best paid players in the squad when you're getting, I don't know, 50% of the games out of him? It's a very difficult decision, that. And I don't personally have a sort of cure-all answer, but I do think there may be an element of responsibility perhaps on Graham Potter to almost take away a bit of the dependency on Kante. Now, he can either do that through system, through sort of tactical approach. Sort of Dennis Zakari is probably a bit of a wild card in this respect. Maybe in time, if he can stay fit, if he can get up to speed at Chelsea, he can take some of that pressure off Kante. And if you can do that, you can maybe go into contract negotiations and go, look, we found a way to play without you now. So let's maybe talk about things in a very different way that we are now, where we kind of know you are our best player when you are fit. And you know that too. But maybe we don't want to commit to you for 3 years when we feel we're not going to get all the matches that we need out of you.
It's crazy to think about the fact that he's been at Chelsea now since the 2016-2017 season. And in his first 3 years at the club, it was 3,100 minutes, 2,900 minutes, 3,000 minutes, just in the Premier League alone, not including any European or additional competition. And that has fallen to 1,700, 2,100 and 1,700 again in the last 3 seasons. And so I think to your point, Adam, I feel like the challenge is going to be both sides convincing each other on what the dependency is on one another and what the reliance is. And if Graham Potter can come up with a solution that makes it a more equitable deal for Chelsea, where N'Golo Kante can stay, can potentially become a player who gets managed a little bit more like Thiago Silva. Because I think maybe the challenge is that there's been an over-reliance on N'Golo Kante because he hasn't been able to get subbed off. He hasn't been able to be treated in a different manner, like someone who is an aging player with injury, in the same way that maybe Thiago Silva has, where it's like, hey, let's get him a match off because we need to preserve him. We need to protect him because the options in midfield have been pretty poor over the last few seasons when you look at who the backup is.
Yeah. And that's obviously, poor planning or poor squad development on Chelsea's part, that they haven't been able to move away from Kante. And Tuchel did at times, try and protect Kante. He tried to leave him out of matches when possible, tried to put him on the bench, but often in those games, you were having to bring him on anyway, either to try and save the game or maybe see out a game. So it is a culmination of, yes, Kante's injury record hasn't been great, and you can kind of trace it back to him playing the Europa League final against Arsenal with a huge injury that you sort of just play through. You can, weave in the fact that squad planning hasn't been great, and that central midfield position hasn't been properly looked at over the last 2 or 3 years. And you can maybe, you can make an argument to Kante, yes, you're brilliant. We know you're brilliant, but can you be demanding top dollar when we can't demand you play every single week? And this is a conversation my colleague Daniel Charles and I were having. At what point does a key player stop becoming a key player if they're never playing?
It's a great point. I think with a lot of that, I would also very shamelessly plug the fact that I did an N'Golo Kante contracts video on YouTube. We're doing more content more than ever. And my biggest
Brandon, do we have a YouTube account?
Well, it's a channel actually, Dan. My gosh, you subscribe to it, you smash the button. That's how it works.
Is there a like button that people are required to smash?
The like button, Dan. Damn it.
Okay, you don't press it.
Can people subscribe? Can people subscribe?
Yes. Ideally, they sign up to the channel and just tip away, just donations.
Should they share it with friends and family and loved ones, and also people who don't like Chelsea?
my big annoyance with the club in Kante is it we've known for a while now he has injury issues, and we have done nothing to come up with some kind of transition plan off of our over-reliance about him. The club had an opportunity to cash in on him and try to buy maybe 2 players when he was at his peak. They opted not to. Instead, we're going to, keep him from as long as we can, which is fine. But at some point, you still have to have a transition plan. And we might end up having him go for free and then needing money to fund more of a Declan Rice move if it is literally that simple. But something has to happen, and nothing has happened up to this point. I talk more about it in the video, but that is my big gripe when it comes to the lack of contingency planning around N'Golo Kante. We've literally, if he's in, great. If not, we're dead in the water. Again, let's see what Zakaria can bring. Hopefully a presence. The dude is a massive unit. But lastly, Dan, it's not about all in the pitch, right? Sometimes you got to boost and beef up the front office. They got some empty offices at the offices over at Stamford Bridge. They got to fill them. Got to put some bodies in there. A lot of people left. So we're looking at sporting directors, technical directors, director of footballs. Apparently we're not looking at loan program people, analysts like Petr Cech. Pour one out for my homie.
I think as you are wont to do, I think that, Adam, as we look at the names, we're starting to see some acceleration in conversation. I think we always thought that maybe as we got to the international break that this would start to happen with the club wanting someone in place before the January transfer window, pre-World Cup, to really start vetting what the moves are that are going to be available to Chelsea and what can they get done in that winter window to, strengthen the squad, to refresh the squad. But we're seeing now Salzburg's Christoph Freund and also Luis Campos, also another surprise name, potentially being touted as being affiliated, and potentially multiple structures of, well, you could fit, could you get Paul Mitchell in to work with one of them if the appetite of the project was exciting enough? Just crazy stuff. And what are you making of all of the names, the links? It seems very similar to Chelsea's strategy within the summer transfer window. It was like, let's put out a lot of feelers and then settle down on the options that can become available to us. But also seemingly in another example of Todd and team really wanting to go for the best available that fits their best available, and ones that also fit their need.
Yeah, I think that's important, as you're saying, Dan. They are going for sporting directors really who are best in class and are very good at building squads and forward planning. How many cooks you can put into a department that does that is, I guess, the debate, and the fact that it's been discussed that someone like Christoph Freund and Luis Campos could come into the same structure is very interesting, because I always feel you need one guy who is driving the idea and the vision forward, and I don't know how that works if you've got two maybe very, very good and adept sporting directors who want to maybe have slightly different ideas. But it shows the ambition again of Todd Boehly and the new ownership. They want to get the very best people on board. We know that they've made a strong pitch to Michael Edwards, who was obviously at Liverpool and oversaw their sort of rise back to the top alongside Jurgen Klopp. But say from what I understand, he's very much telling him, I'm very impressed by what you're coming to me with, but I kind of have said to my family that I'll take a year off. So sorry, I'm going to stick to that. But as I say, it's exciting from a Chelsea perspective, seeing some of the guys that they've been linked with for this sporting director role, just from the fact that a lot of them have built squads based around young players. They've had plans in place. It's exactly what Brandon's saying about Kante. They've had plans in place to ensure that if a player goes or if a player doesn't maybe hit the level expected, they've got another guy ready to come in. From what from what I understand about the ownership at the moment, they are doing a lot of forward planning already. They want to have sort of structures and plans in place going into next summer. They certainly don't want another summer like they've had. They want clear ideas of who they're going to go after. And they want to get the sporting director in before the World Cup to help them do that, because yes, January transfer window, but it is also about getting people in early, letting them get the people they feel would benefit Chelsea as well into the building, and really, really building towards the summer of 23 as the next big sort of recruitment drive from Chelsea's perspective.
All right. I think that, like a lot of things Todd Boehly does, will move fast. I think we're going to see pretty quickly a new org structure, new hierarchy. Again, to go back to that SALT conference, he says his job is to put the right resources in place to be successful within kind of the high vision that he has. This is
here's the question though, for all the three of us is, will we have a sporting director or someone in that capacity in place by the time that Chelsea next kick a ball in the Premier League, which will be the 1st of October?
Yeah, it seems like it at this point. I mean, October is so far away in the way Boehly acts. I don't know what you think, Adam.
17 days. That's like 5 years in Todd Boehly Chelsea time.
I mean, at this point, it wouldn't shock me. I don't think it's quite all there yet, but yeah, so given everything that's happened this summer and the speed at which they managed to go and get Graham Potter after they decided to sort of part ways with Thomas Tuchel, I mean, I wouldn't put anything beyond them. If they set their mind to something, they seem like they're going to do it, and they're going to do it quickly. Yeah.
And this will signal another big change from the Roman era, where he didn't have a director of football, sporting director, all these different things, right? He ran it his way. Obviously, I think a lot of us fans are quite happy with the way it went overall, but this is definitely a strong signal of change that, but it's also very typical around Europe and things like that. So it's just all about getting the right people in the right places. And that's what Todd wants to do. So anyways, that's going to wrap us up. Adam, thanks a ton for jumping and taking some time out of your day, jumping in with us and just kind of give us a state of the state, especially with all these moving pieces going on at Chelsea. Really appreciate it.
No worries, guys. Thanks very much for having me.
Awesome. Again, Adam Newson, Football.London. We'll get the Twitter link in the bio. Make sure to go click it, give him a follow, and tell him thank you for sharing all the Chelsea knowledge. He's a true vet of the game. But anyways, that's going to wrap us up. More content coming at you guys. You know that. Again, shameless plug. I'm doing a lot of YouTube stuff. Go check it out. Join our Discord community through Patreon. Amazing group of Chelsea fans talking Chelsea every day, all day. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.